these are just imbalances in the body that can be peeled back, and then those symptoms just drop off. It's actually crazy. And then things like excessive earwax that can be caused by fungal, fogginess and spaciness, bedwetting, picky eating limited to carby foods, of course we've covered that, and high pitched noises and vocal stimming, constipation, eczema and rashes, toenail fungus obviously, and a coated tongue. So why are those symptoms there? And I'll just sort of talk to you a little bit about like the science behind like what yeast does and why we see those symptoms. So yeast feeds on sugar, of course, as we've discussed, and then yeast produces ethanol, which is basically alcohol, and then that kind of, as a byproduct of its metabolism, produces another really toxic substance, which I struggle to pronounce, but it's called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde. Sorry, I need to get my my dictionary out. But essentially, it's like a toxic byproduct that is essentially like almost like alcohol. And if you think about yeast producing like an alcoholic sort of substance, because if you think about so say you've been out like as an adult and had too much alcohol, you think about most of those symptoms there, like you're craving, aren't you? You're craving like crisps and things like that, and like the carby stuff, and then you're spacey and foggy, and like your executive functioning is poor, and you might be quite sort of like, and you're laughing, like you find the stupidest stuff funny, and that's all because of the alcohol in your brain. Well, this is basically what's happening to our kids when there's a yeast overgrowth, because it's producing like aldehydes and ethanol and alcohol, which basically like they block detox pathways in the body, which is like another topic, but it's alcohol in their brain. So essentially what yeast overgrowth does is it makes our kids drunk, you know? And so it's almost like we're sobering our kids up. And then when you clear yeast, it's like some people say, wow, like he woke up. And like, you know, and I see that a lot. And that was the same for Rose as well. She was sort of like this goofy, sort of clumsy, like person that was sort of like all over the place. And then it was like, oh, she could actually sit and focus and stay still for 10 minutes, you know, and actually not be all over the place. So yeast metabolizes glucose and will produce ethanol. So it produces, it metabolizes sugars as its food source, and then it will produce alcohol, basically. And then if you think about the other impacts of that for our kids, so alcohol will deplete B vitamins, zinc and magnesium. Honestly, like all of those things are like so essential for like a functioning nervous system in a child, and keeping sensory to like in a regulated state, and keeping the senses like not integrated because that's your field, but like just stabilized, you know, and actually not kind of like, you know, like stimming constantly and stuff like that. And then yeast aldehydes are also inhibitory for some of the enzymes that you need to methylate. You know, and we've spoken about methylation, you know, in a brief podcast, but methylation is essential for every single function in your body, especially things like detoxification. So if that system's getting blocked, you know, things like speech delays are really common because you need to methylate for sleep and speech, like every function. So your functionality is going to be a lot lower if that system is impaired. And then, so think about aldehydes, which are the alcohol produced by yeasts, are also broken down by the same enzymes that break down our neurotransmitters. So if you think about, there's almost like a competition there for like breaking down things like, you know, serotonin and dopamine, and you think, oh, that might be a good thing because they'd be higher. Well, it's not, because what happens is the child ends up with a very like spiky profile, I call it, where it's like they're up, then they're really down, then they're really up, then they're really down. It's almost like these moods that are going like all over the place all day because they can't break down neurotransmitters well. So when things like serotonin, for example, when it gets really high, the body hates that and the brain hates that. So it will flip it down, almost like insulin does with blood glucose. And then you're seeing like, you might get rages because of that. So you're seeing this really high kid, and this is what Rose was like, really high. She's like almost laughing at everything. And then all of a sudden she's in this rage and this like real like horrendous mood. And there are loads of things that can contribute to that, but this is one of them. And then also, when there is a yeast overgrowth, the breakdown of things like glutamate, which is really excitatory neurotransmitter that's always in excess in our kids. There's loads of science around this because I was actually writing an article yesterday for a magazine and researching some of the, you know, the articles that are written on this. And it's always high in our kids, like it's like a very excitatory neurotransmitter that causes stimming and sleep issues and like speech delays. So it slows the breakdown of that neurotransmitter. So it means it's even, you know, even more of a build-up of that, which makes it more exciting.